Hey everyone. Hey everyone. I'm just gonna give a little time for some people to get in here and talk about the draft and what happened in round two. So, basically, it was an interesting first round. It started out pretty normal. Myles Garrett. Um, is he the guy that is he my number one? No, but um, he makes sense. He's the probably the most athletic player, and if you want the most upside, that's what the Browns got in Myles Garrett. I don't think that it was actually that big of a need for them. They needed more sacks, but they could have allowed their other pass rushers gave them time to develop. But they're gonna have a really sick combination now. So and I think both of their pass rushers now are like 275 pounds, so you can play them both inside if you want to do a sub package of only two defensive tackles. You can move your two edge guys and have a really sick pass rush. Um, but it was an okay pick, but I think that he's got some motor issues. He's inconsistent, and I really think that those are going to come back and bite Cleveland, and it's going to cause them to bust. And that's why I had Solomon Thomas as my number one player, because Another thing about Garrett, he didn't do his agility drills, and I think that's because he has average bend, so he's got this really fast burst, and then he needs that burst to get around the offensive tackle because he can't really bend well enough that if he doesn't get off to that exceptional start, he won't be able to get around the offensive tackle. And I question, at the next level, can he get off to the start off the ball that he needs to beat these tackles with his bend because it's very average. So that I don't think he would have had a sub 7.0 three cone, which is what you need as a pass rusher. And Solomon Thomas did have a sub 3 or sub 7.0 three cone. I think that's a big deal. Thomas has great burst. He plays really low. He's more of an inside guy, like a 4-3 defensive tackle, but he can play 3-4 or he can play on the edge because that he proved it with his athleticism testing. So, and then I thought that Lynch for San Francisco absolutely killed it at number two with when he traded down to go to three. He got my number one player, and he got what was it, a third and a fourth this year, and a third next year. And the third and fourth this year are like really good third and fourth round picks because there's a lot of talent in those rounds compared to most years. So those are going to be typically second round picks that you're going to get in the third and fourth round now. So uh, and then to skip ahead and go to San Francisco's other pick. Let me that yeah, they had Reuben Foster at the end at number 31 overall, and Foster fell. He's got those injury concerns, but and the character blow up at the combine a little bit was an issue, but that's not a big deal, or it shouldn't be. I think the injury is the bigger deal, and we'll have to see with that. But if the injury works out, I think he needs to change how he tackles because he keeps his head low and leans with his shoulder. He needs to break down into a triple threat stance and keep his head up. And that's exactly what I was talking about before day one. And I'm surprised he fell to 31, but I'm not surprised he fell a little. But I think, going to San Francisco where they love their linebackers, he's bringing that old style defense back to San Francisco when they were successful. Um, Before their, you know, last terrible GM decided to destroy their exceptional team for no reason. And I'm not even a San Francisco fan, so I thought it was fantastic. But I just I can't believe that GM got away with what he did. But then back to number 2 overall, with the Chicago Bears, they traded up from number 3, and I thought they gave away too much, and they paid Glennon too much, 17 million, I think it is a year. If you're just using him as a stopgap, you paid him like a starter, and my guess is they took Glennon as their starter, not knowing if they would get a quarterback, and then they thought that the trade up was reasonably priced, and they so like a third, fourth, and third, it's a lot, but they at the same time I didn't check it on the trade value chart, but it's probably in terms of value about equal. So and if they like him, like Trubisky is my number one quarterback, and he's got some issues, but he's very athletic, the most athletic quarterback in the draft. People don't realize that 4.6 40, compared to Mahomes and Watson were in the 4.8s. So uh, I think Kaiser was like 4.8s or 4.9s. So Trubisky is like significantly more athletic than those other guys that are considered to be athletic. And then he's got fantastic ball placement. Um, he protects his wide receivers. And I saw an interesting tweet where he only has 13 starts, but he actually has like as many passing attempts as Aaron Rodgers had coming out of college and like some other quarterbacks or close to it. Although obviously Rodgers went JUCO and then transferred in, but still. Um, so while Trubisky is younger, the Bears can sit him for a year if they want, and he also has like more. He's probably got about 2 years worth of passing attempts. So and his previous years, he actually passed really well, really accurately. He does his damage where the NFL is, you know, trying to do their damage in that intermediate level. These guys who throw it deep and the wide receiver runs under it in the NFL or in the college game, those are, the RG3s and Johnny Manziels of the world and the Pat Mahomes of the world. Those are the guys that bust. So Trubisky, I mean, if he busts out, he'll be like a Christian Ponder. If he if he does like average, he's like an Alex Smith you could compare him to, or if he does exceptional, that's where you get into like the Tom Brady's. That's the kind of style quarterback he is. So that gives you the range. I hate player comps though, because no two players are the same. Uh, And then if we go down to number 4 overall, Jacksonville Jaguars took Leonard Fournette. I'm not a big fan of this pick, but I understand it. I think it's too high. I actually like Todd Gurley better when he came out, and he went like number 10 overall. He did have the ACL though, so uh, Fournette, he runs kind of high. He has injury issues, but he can be a game changer. He's pretty powerful. I actually don't think he's as powerful as like James Conner from Pittsburgh, but just all around, he is one of the best players. So it makes sense to take him there. And if you want to help your quarterback, you want to help your offensive line. Fournette's the type of guy where if if things aren't blocked, he can just run over the guy. That's actually what that's a benefit of him, but it's also his one of his biggest detriments where he could get more yards when he gets to the second level if he'd avoid some of these guys and stiff arm them or something. But all he's looking to do is run them over, and it costs him a lot of yards and also gets them hurt. So. Uh, I think the coaching staff should work on that, and if they can get him to change his mentality a little bit, um, he could be even a better running back in the NFL than what he was in college. But the jury is out, and I think he's gonna be when it comes down to it. I think he's probably gonna bust, and he'll be like one of those injury busts where you understood the pick, but you'll just say it's an unfortunate injury. Um, then number 5 overall is Corey Davis with Tennessee. I thought it was a little too early for Davis. I like him, I'm a big Packers fan, and we had Greg Jennings from Western Michigan, who was a second round pick. He was great for us, but Corey Davis reminds me a lot of Greg Jennings just because of the school and all of that, and because they could both play all the positions, um, all the different wide receiver positions. You can put them in the slot. You can put them on both outside wide receiver spots. But Davis has, the injury. The injury is actually kind of serious in my opinion. They called it minor, but he had like two torn. Um, he had to have surgery on two of his nerves in his ankle, and that's a big deal because that can be debilitating. So he might come back and not have all of his agility or speed. And on top of that, he didn't do any testing. So you don't even know what his agility or speed actually is in terms of timing. And he looks like a like high 4.4 guy to me. Um, but if he came in at the 4.5, that wouldn't surprise me, and it would cause me to want to drop him. So, and I'm not sure he would do his agility. I'm not sure is elite. Like I think it's good, but not elite. Um, and then you always have the production concerns. He he did do pretty solidly against Wisconsin, but um, he didn't play too many top caliber defenses, so that's another issue. But so overall, number 5, it's high. I guess there's not a lot of clean guys to take, and it's a skill position draft, and you got to get maybe they really just wanted to get a wide receiver and thought he felt one that out of the top 3, his style fit them best. So it makes sense from that standpoint. Then, and if you look where the other wide receivers went at 7, Mike Williams went, and 9 is where John Ross went. It was probably good that they took a receiver when they did. But then you have Jets took Adams. He fell a little bit, not too much. I mean, he's a strong safety. Um, he's more of one of those clean guys that I don't think he has any character or serious injury concerns. So, you always have to upgrade a guy just for being clean. Now, strong safety isn't like a value position, so but I think the Jets' defense is one of those where they can really make use of a strong safety, and if he's going to be your playmaker that gets if he gets their offense into second and longs and can make stops on third and short, then he can be worth it. So, and if he can shut down those tight ends, especially being in that division, it's probably cliche, but if you have New England with Gronkowski and those guys, so and the whole conference is just loaded with tight ends. So uh, Adams makes more sense from that standpoint too. And then Mike Williams, I mentioned a little bit, but from San Diego at number 7, I don't really. He's not an elite guy, but he's very. Uh, he he's good enough, I guess. Like he's got some things that you can't measure too. When he jumps into the air, he can twist his body in midair in a way to get that ball, and he's got a big catching radius, and you can't measure that. So he doesn't run the fastest 40. He doesn't have the best agility, but he's a guy that hasn't needed to be open, if you know what I mean. So um, and he's willing to lay out for a ball and actually stays healthy somehow. Uh, so I like Mike. I mean, it's a little earlier than I would normally want for Mike Williams, but these wide receivers got pushed up, so I don't have a big problem with it. A lot of people want a defense for the Chargers. I totally get the offensive pick because you can get defense next round, and on top of it, you know, the Chargers need to reinforce their offensive identity. It's one of the biggest mistakes I think the Packers have made. The Packers have Aaron Rodgers, and we're really good offensively, but we're like that one player short of just having a dominant offense. And I think if we drafted that, one more offensive player to just create like an unstoppable offense, you then reinforce your identity, and it just that will improve the defense, um, which people sometimes forget. If you can control the ball on offense and score a lot of points as well, that'll help your defense out. It takes the pressure off them, and it gets the opposing offense out of rhythm when they're sitting on the bench. So those 3-and-outs really kill you too. So will really kill your defense. So I like the offensive pick to reinforce their identity from that standpoint. Then you have Christian McCaffrey at number 8 overall with Carolina Panthers. Now, we knew this could happen because the sports books, they're usually pretty good, and they had one of them had the over under at 8.5, and the other one had the over under. The under was 8.5, and then the over was not 9.5. So if he got drafted number 9 overall, then it would be a put. Then both sides would lose. So um, that was interesting, and he did go at number 8 to Carolina. I think it's way too high. Terrible pick. He's not going to get enough touches to make it worth it. But he did test amazingly. Um, he's basically a wide receiver at the running back position. And, he is probably going to use, they are probably going to use him on special teams. So if he can make some big plays on special teams consistently, then maybe he can be worth it. But number 8 is awfully high for a role player like that. Um, he did get a lot of carries, even for a small size. He got a lot of carries at Stanford, and on one hand, that's good because he didn't get injured, but it did put some tread on the tires there. And number 9, you have John Ross from Washington going to the Bengals. And it's higher than a lot of people thought he would go, but actually, I, I thought he might be the number 1 wide receiver because, depending on the medical, because he did run the 4.22 40, and I know 40 isn't everything, but that's a generational type trait. Like we might never see another 4.22 40 in our lifetime, and if we do, that might stand for a decade. Um, and he's not just a track guy. He's an actual football player who I'd have seen him absolutely destroy the press. Like Adoree Jackson would try to press him from Southern California, and Adoree Jackson was a first round pick, and John Ross just like destroyed him. So, and then you're pairing him. The thing I really love about this pick, you're pairing Ross with AJ Green. That is gonna be, such a good pairing. Now, can Dalton get Ross the ball consistently? And Dalton tends to see the play late, but I think Dalton's good enough, but Dalton might hold Ross back a little bit. But any bit that Dalton holds Ross back, Green will be helping Ross out. So overall, that's like such an amazing combination. Really happy to see that. Because I'm rooting for Ross. I've been banging the table for him for a while, and you don't want to see the guy you've been pounding the table for go to like a shitty situation, and then everybody's like, "See, I told you so. He wasn't worth that high of a pick." Then Pat Mahomes at number 10 overall, one of my worst picks of the entire round. So I don't like Pat Mahomes. He's got a big arm. He's got quote unquote athleticism. He's not very athletic, but he does what he has to get away from defenders, and he's creative, is what I would say. Um, and there's something to be said for how he can throw the ball, how he can contort his body, and still have that extremely strong arm. But overall, number 10, I don't like it. They even traded up and gave away a future first, if I remember right. And they have Alex Smith. Um, I don't have a problem getting a quarterback. I just don't think this was the right one to get. Then you have Marshawn Lattimore at number 11. By the way, I really had Pat Mahomes down low. He was like my number 8 quarterback or something like that. I had him as a day 3 guy. I knew he'd go probably first round, but in terms of where I would take guys, like I wouldn't even consider Mahomes until the 3rd round, and I probably wouldn't take him until like the 6th round. So, uh, then you have Marshawn Lattimore at number 11 with New Orleans. And this is a pick that is hard to judge. He went in a really weird spot because if it's the injury, why didn't he's got that hamstring, and some people don't realize how serious of an issue that is. He hurt it like 3 times, then had surgery on it because it was like he was injuring it so often, and then he comes back and hurt it again. So that's like a chronic hamstring for a cornerback, which that's not good. And you'd think like if that was that big of a deal, wouldn't he drop further? But if it wasn't a problem, much of a problem, wouldn't he go earlier? So maybe it's just like they didn't see it as a huge problem, and there's so many cornerbacks that dropped him, I guess. But he was my number 3 prospect, I think, overall. Let me look here. Yeah, I had him number 3 overall, Lattimore, and I had John Ross number 4 overall. Um, between number 9 overall and number 11 overall, those are pretty good values for those teams. Then and they filled a big need, so I'm sure they're happy. Deshaun Watson at number 12 with Houston. They traded up. Um, it's an okay pick. I really like his intangibles, but his I worry about his mental capacity after seeing, or his I should say his ability to process after seeing his Wonderlic was a 20, which is super bad for a quarterback. You want it to be at least like 30, and you want it to be more like a 35. Um, and the score only goes up to a 50, I think it is. So 35 is pretty, or 20 is pretty dang low. And he also only got a 49 on the miles per hour on the radar gun, which I'm not a big fan of the radar gun test, but because it doesn't really matter how hard you can throw, it's how hard you can throw accurately. But they usually want you to be at 55 miles an hour, and Trubisky was at 52 for some context, which like that's close enough, but Watson was at 49, and there's like guys like Pat Mahomes were at I think 60 or higher. So um, that I don't understand that pick. Um, I guess he did. Maybe they put a lot of value on the championship, and I think they did value that he's ready to start now. And I guess they panicked from all these quarterbacks were going. He's probably the only quarterback they really liked that was left. Um, I still think, and I know a lot of people laugh at me for this, I still think Houston should have, if they couldn't get Romo, they should have went for Jay Cutler. I know Cutler throws his interceptions and he's got diabetes and he's got, you know, mentally he doesn't really have the passion he doesn't put in for all the film time from rumors that I've heard, but um, Jay Cutler, he can still win you games, and he wasn't going to carry Chicago, but Houston's got a really good team, and I felt you didn't have to like Watson. I don't think is going to carry them either, so they're now a team waiting for a quarterback to develop, while they could have just plugged in Jay Cutler. And I mean, maybe they still go get Cutler and let Watson, uh, you know, on the bench, sit him on the bench for a year. But the Watson, he doesn't really need the bench time because he's just limited physically, in my opinion, or mentally, I guess I should say. So I'd rather go Kaiser. I think Kaiser is a great quarterback if you want to sit someone for a year. Or Trubisky, he was a good quarterback to sit for a year as well. But then you have Arizona. They took Reddick, the linebacker from Temple. Now, if you haven't watched Temple football, it's excellent football to watch. It's so fun to watch. If you like good defense, Temple's a fantastic team to watch. But and they actually have a couple of good players. They have like I think it's an offensive tackle too. That's probably going to get drafted pretty highly. So um, their Temple's in like if you don't pay close attention to college, they're actually a good team now. They've had good coaching that teaches them the proper way to play, and um, I guess Reddick has that awesome athleticism. 13 is a little rich, but I mean I don't love a lot of these guys, so when I'm saying like it's a little rich for a lot of these guys. Well, I mean, someone had to go here. I like I guess when I'm looking at who could really go earlier, I'm surprised that OJ Howard fell as far as he did, and um, Gary Conley. I think people got scared of with that rape accusation, but I think he should have went higher. Um, so there's a couple that like Njoku should have went higher. I think Watt should have went higher. Ramchuk, Foster. But then these the medical on these guys that could have made them drop too. So uh, then we have Barnett at number 14. He's a solid player. I'm not in love with these edge rushers this year, but if you want to take one, it's number 14. I think the value matches here. He highly productive. I think he beat out Reggie White's sack record. Um, so that's pretty impressive. Um, I do worry about Tennessee guys a lot because they seem to have low football IQ a lot of times, and but that's more of like a problem with the school, and it doesn't necessarily apply to Barnett. So we'll see what he does. He didn't test fantastically, but he does produce on the field. So a lot of people say that he guesses the snap, and I mean, if he can do it consistently enough, I don't really have a problem with that. Um, if that helps him get sacks, so. But yeah, he doesn't really have the elite burst that you're looking for. But I think he can bend around the edge pretty solidly. So, and he's got enough physically to win as a pass rusher if he uses really good technique. So he has to continue to improve his technique. That's key. Um, number 15 is Malik Hooker with the Indianapolis Colts. And if you have any questions, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat too. Feel free to, ask about a player or a second round or a specific team, whatever. But Malik Hooker, I'm not surprised at all that he fell to number 15 because, you know, a lot of people know about what I call the play, Clemson versus Ohio State, and um, Clemson threw it deep into the end zone. It was like 40 yards, and Hooker tracked that ball down from the other side of the field and made like a diving interception. Thing is, like Ohio State got crushed, and they got crushed because of Malik Hooker. It's funny, his most impressive play came in one of his worst games. Uh, he basically is a freelancer. He doesn't follow his responsibilities. I'm not sure if that's scheme. I don't think it is, but it could be because um, they did have Conley and Lattimore, and just let those guys go on islands, and then have Hooker play like a Palomalu type role where he just does what he wants and tries to get interceptions. But Hooker's got like really good speed. I always like to double check the speed with the time though. I want to see those match up. And because of his injury, we didn't get to see him test. So that I do worry about that. And then, you have that Clemson basically they would run one wide receiver up over to the left and deep, and then they'd run the other one straight up deep, and uh, basically, no matter what Hooker did, he was always running himself out of the play. Sometimes he'd take neither wide receiver and crash down on the running back, and it's like, Hooker, what are you doing? And that gave up, a good 3 or 4 touchdowns was just Clemson abusing Hooker. So I actually would say Ohio State pretty much lost because of Hooker single-handedly. Um, Then you have Humphrey to Baltimore at number 16 overall. It's kind of funny because Baltimore's GM loves those Ozzie Newsome. He loves those Alabama players. He's from Alabama, and it's a bit of a reach, I think, but not too badly here. It's kind of just what guys do you like. Apparently, he likes Humphrey. I liked guys like Conley. Um, but a lot of the cornerbacks, did have issues. Like Conley had the rape accusation. That you had Sidney Jones, who's one of the top guys. He tears his Achilles. Fabian Moreau, who I don't think would have been a first rounder, but he was in that conversation. He tears his pectoral. So when you actually got to it, Howard Wilson was looking like a first rounder for a while, and then he ran a bad 40. So when it comes down to it, I don't think that he really. I don't think it's really that deep in the first round, and not as deep as people think. Um, I mean, when you look at Adoree Jackson went number 18 overall to the Titans, that is a huge reach. That's one of the worst picks of the entire draft. I would put the Pat Mahomes pick worse, but Jackson is only 5'10", and he's like 185 pounds, and you're taking him number 18 overall. All he can do is pretty much play the nickel. I mean, sometimes you can have those undersized guys. Sometimes they will work out outside, but I never want to take an undersized guy with intent to put him outside. Um, so I really question the Dory Jackson pick. I think they're probably looking for a playmaker, and that's why they went with him. But I still don't like it. I think the whole playmaker label, um, a lot of times guys that are playmakers don't show it in college because they don't get thrown at, and guys who aren't really playmakers, they just get beat a lot. They get thrown at so much that they make a couple plays and then they have 4 interceptions or whatever at the end of the season, and they look like a playmaker. I think that's the case with Jackson. I'll try to look up his how many interceptions he had again quick, but uh, he got targeted a lot, and he got dismantled by John Ross, as I mentioned earlier. His press was he really struggled in press. Um, he played on offense too, so he did have 5 interceptions, and he had a fumble return for 26 yards, so um, 11 pass breakups. So he does have that playmaker mentality. So, and then he did play on special teams a little bit, returned 2 punts for touchdowns. So they're probably looking for. I don't know if the Titans need a returner. I mean, I guess they're trying to upgrade their return team. I don't know the Titans special teams well enough, but maybe one of you guys know if the Titans need a returner or not. But let me know if they do. But then OJ Howard at number 19 overall. He's he's a good player. The thing I like about OJ Howard that I think should have forced him up a lot higher, top around the 10th overall pick, is because he's just a clean player. I don't know of many injury issues or character issues. You know, he went back to school. It was a good decision. He worked on his blocking. Um, yeah, his blocking is, superb now. He shows he has the athleticism. He's got pretty good hands. Plenty good to be a receiver. He can stretch the field vertically. He's truly a guy that whatever your offense struggles at, he can fill that role. If you need a big target to get those first downs, he can get it. If you need a big target to go down and stretch the field, for some long plays, OJ Howard can do that. And if you don't have enough time and you just need someone back to, help block and pass protect, he can do that too. Or you want to run the ball, he can create some holes. So he can block like an offensive lineman uh, to some extent. So I really like that pick, and the fit too with the Bucs needs to be talked about because Jameis Winston is a guy who throws a lot of interceptions by overthrowing receivers, and the Bucs are doing a great job with surrounding him with tall talent, and OJ Howard is going to be another one of those tall receivers for Winston to throw to. So I think from looking at the quarterback that they have, it makes a lot of sense. This was one of those picks that took like a minute, and they didn't even consider trading down, which I think that was smart as well. The Denver Broncos at number 20 overall. They took Garrett Bowles from Utah. Now that's interesting because he's one of those Mormons that went on the retreat and everything, so they're always like typically older. And Garrett Bowles is 24. He'll be 25 May 27th. So you're talking he's gonna be like 28 or 29 after his first contract's up. So he's losing a full contract on age. Um, but there weren't many offensive linemen to choose from. And I believe Denver runs his own blocking scheme, which is he's a perfect fit for. And he has fantastic feet. He ran his 20 shuttle was pretty good, but his 3 cone was like 2/10 faster than the third best 3 cone at the combine. Because he had like a 7.29, if I remember right, and there was like Dion Dawkins, I think, had a 7.30, but other than that, it was like 7.50 or something like that was the next best. And that's some elite athleticism right there from the big guy. So, and the other guy that was close to him in the 3 cone was a guard. So, I really I get the Bulls pick. He does have some character issues in the past, but he was suspended from like 5 different schools. So he before he got to Utah. So I don't know. It's a little risky from that standpoint, but in this draft, if you want to tackle, and you got to match tackle to your style, and if you feel Bulls Denver probably feels Bulls is a perfect fit for their style. So um, you overlook some of those character issues. You can't be too picky this late in the draft with this terrible tackle class. Because this isn't a tackle class where you say, I'll pass in the first round and get a guy in the second or third. No, there are no guys in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or even seventh. This is a terrible tackle draft from day 1 to day 3. So you just overlook and pray, I guess, that the character cleans up. And from what I've heard, the rumors are his character has cleaned up as well. So uh, then you have Jarrad Davis at Florida. This guy's a bullet. He just, he's a heat-seeking missile. Maybe that's a better term for him, where he follows the ball carrier, finds him, and then locks on and flies through the line, and he can get through the traffic and make the tackle. So his closing speed is ridiculous. He's got pretty good play recognition as well. So the Lions taking Jarrad Davis is a pretty solid pick in my opinion. And then you have Charles Harris with the Miami Dolphins at pick number 22. The edge rusher out of Missouri. I'm not a big fan because, I like my edge rushers to have bend. Yeah, that's like the number one thing I look for. And the number one drill I look at is the three cone. And he was like a 4.35 or something like that. Excuse me, 7.35 three cone. And I just, that's hard for me to overlook. And that's why, that's pretty common with a lot of these edge rushers. McKinley, he didn't run one. And then, so that bothers me. He had like an injury. And then you have Taco Charlton was like a 4.15 or something like that, which I wanted to see them be a sub 7.0. I keep saying 4. Uh, he had like a 7.15 three cone. Taco Charlton did. But it's okay, but it's not as good as I want to see. And then, these other guys like Harris are in the 4.3s. Tim Williams, who's still available, 4.3s or 7.3s. Um, so not a big fan of the pick. It kind of reminds me of when the Dolphins took Deion Jordan, except they took him in the top 5. I think it was like number 3 or number 4 overall, and it was just like one of those pass rushes destined to fail. That's how I feel Charles Harris is. But some people had him 10th overall, 11th overall, so we'll see. Evan Ingram, number 23 overall, the Mississippi tight end / wide receiver hybrid, went to the Giants. He's okay. I'm not a big fan. He reminds me of Devin Funchess. I'm not a big fan of his. I don't like those hybrids. They always look better athletically than they really translate to the field, in my opinion. Um, some people say he's an underrated blocker. I don't really think he is. I just think he's a bad blocker. Um, he is a pretty solid receiver. He's got plenty of speed to stretch the field, but um, I mean, I'd rather just have a receiver do that, or a tight end that is bigger to actually block. Um, Another thing is I don't really like those short tight ends that are like 6'3". If I want my tight end to be like 6'5" and have him be that tall threat. Um, if you do have a 6'3" tight end, then you should probably have like a Mike Evans or something as a receiver. Then, so the Giants are looking pretty short overall at their receiving core. Not a big fan of what they're doing there. Um, Gareon Conley to Oakland, I mentioned, at number 24 overall from Ohio State. He's the other Ohio State cornerback. Big fan. I had him in the top 10. I think he was overlooked a little bit, being for the number 2 cornerback at Ohio State. But like I said before, he was put on an island and didn't get much safety help, so that the safety could go and make plays. And he did a really good job. He locked guys down. Um, and when teams did throw his way, he punished them. So I I like the pick. He's got the rape allegation, but I think it's bullshit. So and it's gonna go away when they settle anyway. So even if he did it, um, but there are like 3 witnesses on his side, 2 who he didn't even know before the night, and then there's supposedly a video of contradicting the accuser's accusations. So we'll see. But I think Oakland's going to end up with a steal. And let me just look here on where I actually had Conley. He was my number 8 overall prospect, with Lattimore being my number 3. So I was real high on him. Then it's important to note I had him that highly. Some other people, he was kind of all over. Some people had him top 10, some people had him in the teens, and then some people had him towards around this range. So it's hard to know if he dropped because of the accusation or not. I'm this venture to guess. I think he dropped a little bit, but I don't think he dropped that far. So, and there were reports like he could go top 100, but he, is probably going to be third round somewhere. I never really bought that, but I think he'll be happy when number 24 overall when he was risking, the third round or possibly not being drafted. That's what some people thought. Jabril Peppers at number 25 overall, the Cleveland safety. Uh, I actually like him as a free safety, but a lot of people have him as a strong safety, and I think that's where he'll play as a strong safety. But he could possibly play cornerback. I don't like him at linebacker at all. He's too small. He's not very good when the play is behind him, in coverage. So he needs to keep everything in front, and that's why he's really good crashing down on running backs and stuff. And that's why I would like him as a free safety, because as long as the play's in front of him, he can make those big hits, and I'd have him as a kind of rangy free safety that's playing back real deep, just trying to keep the play in front. But the Browns probably won't use him like that. It's an okay pick. I It's about where he should go. It's just he's Peppers isn't really a player I really liked. And then you throw on I didn't really like him before the failed drug test, and then you put on the dil- diluted sample or whatever, but it's basically a failed test. That's how the NFL looks at it. So, and let's be honest, the guy's probably on steroids. Um, like just look at how ripped he is. So then you go to at number 26 overall, Atlanta as Tack McKinley. He's another edge rusher. And if you're gonna take Atlanta traded up, and now they only have. My big issue here with trading up is now you only have 4 overall picks in the entire draft. And I was looking on ESPN and they had like 5 team needs listed. Um, I don't really like how their GM does business because he did the big trade for Julio Jones, and Julio Jones became about as good as he could be, and the trade was like still just okay in terms of value. I think there's a lot of people that argue they still lost value, even as good as Julio Jones is, because they gave up like a first and second, and then like a first in the following draft, and a couple other picks. And at some point, one of these guys are gonna bust, and he's running so low on these draft picks that the depth of Atlanta is gonna be hurt. And I think you're gonna see that Atlanta's gonna be one of those teams that gets close to the Super Bowl. They got there and lost, and I think they're gonna fall off and not get back for a while. And it's gonna be because they keep trading away so many picks. McKinley, he's not exactly a low risk guy either. He makes sense to be a guy to take a risk on, um, because the other edge rushers they do have that bad 3 cone. They that 7-3 cone, but um, I mean their T.J. Watt isn't really a true pass rusher like a McKinley is. He's more of an jack of all trades guy, but um, But still, there's like no times from his injury. He did have the injury, so uh, it's an okay pick. It just I don't love. I would like it a lot more if Atlanta had more picks in case he doesn't work out. And then Buffalo has they traded down a while. I think they originally started out with the number 10 or number 11 overall pick, and they got down to number 27 and picked up White, the cornerback from LSU. Not a big fan of him, um, but the value is starting to get okay here. I thought he was like a 50th overall type of prospect, 40 to 50, so top to mid second. But I mean, he can possibly play. I guess they see him as an outside cornerback. I see him more as a slot cornerback. Um, but not much else to say there. Uh, I just think there are better guys available. Then you have Taco Charlton with Dallas at number 28 overall, Michigan. Um, he's he's okay. He had some solid production, but uh, you know, I think I beat a dead horse about this edge rusher class. So I think the second round is where you want to get edge guys this year, like Derek Rivers and guys like that. Uh, Number 29 overall is Njoku. Cleveland traded up, uh, with the Packers. I was pretty happy about that as a Packers fan. There were some guys that the Packers could have taken here, but um, they picked up two tight ends already, so that kind of in free agency, so that kind of put Njoku out of the question for the most part. And then the Packers don't value Foster. I don't think they really liked Watt that much, and they just re-signed Perry, and they have Matthews. Plus, they have Kyler. Watt's too much like Kyler Fackrell, who came out of Utah State, and he, they're really good. Fackrell's a really good cover guy, and I think a lot of the damage Watt does is blitzing up the middle, actually, and also covering. So Watt's a guy that needs to be moved around a lot. You can't just line him up and expect him to like be a Jack or also known as Leo and just pass rush every down because he's not going to succeed like that. So, but if the Steelers use him right, that's a perfect fit for the Steelers. But in terms of the Browns with Njoku, the Cleveland gets another receiving threat. He's super athletic. This is good value. Even the trade up, giving up picks, they have plenty of picks. I like what they did. So I think it's a win-win trade. And it was a little surprising that they didn't go for Kaiser there. I was like certain that Cleveland was going for Kaiser, but it makes sense that not to. But now, what does Cleveland do at quarterback? That's the big thing, because now trading up for him means that they're probably not getting one. Though the one thing is Kaya. I really like Kaya from Miami. He does really good in the elements and really well. And then he like destroyed Pittsburgh in hurricane. So if he could bring that to Cleveland, where there's a lot of wind and bad elements, I think Kaya would make sense especially if they can get him in like the third round. But overall, I think they kind of have an eye on a quarterback next year. So maybe they go after a free agent like Cousins or something. It's pretty hard for Cleveland to depend on getting a free agent quarterback, though. Um, and then T.J. Watt for the Steelers. I just talked a little bit about him, but I I do like him a lot. It's just I can see why the Packers were willing to let him go by. He's a perfect fit for the 3-4. I think he can play all four linebacker positions. Um, he's he's not that big. He's like 250 pounds, but he plays bigger than he is, and he can use leverage, and he's extremely athletic and strong. So he can take on guys much bigger than him and still hold the point. And he doesn't just pin his ears back and go after the quarterback. He plays, the run first and then goes after the quarterback. So and then when he does get to the quarterback, he makes the sack because he does have the athleticism to not let them get away. And he's got a high football IQ. He's going to knock passes down like J.J. Watt does. He's going to intercept balls. He returned them for a touch, like at least one, maybe two in college for a touchdown. Um, so he does bring some of his brother's game with the little things, but he's a much smaller player and plays a different position. Um, Overall, his main position will be 3-4 outside linebacker, where J.J. Watt plays 3-4 defensive end. But in terms of just like it, if you throw away the name, um, T.J. Watt's still a very good player. I had him like number 15 on my big board. I might have had him a little too high because he's not a pure enough pass rusher. But at number 20 or number 30 overall, like that's really good value. Even though he was projected like 40, and sometimes I think this is starting to get like good value with him. Reuben Foster, number 31 overall to San Francisco. I talked about him already. He's a good player that I think went to a perfect spot and fell because of injury. I mean, I don't think he fell because of character. Um, I think the way he plays puts a lot of stress on his AC joint, and his nerves are going to continue to get injured, and he's going to have a short career. So um, there's a lot of risks there, but even if you get, even 4 years out of him, that can be enough sometimes, and to be worth a pick if he's a really good player. So, there are how many got first rounders that they do really well, and then teams let them go because they're cap casualty anyway. So you need to get at least one contract out of your first round guy. Um, then Ryan Ramczyk, New Orleans, at number 32 overall. Pretty solid player. I thought he'd get pushed up because of the weak offensive tackle class. He didn't. He can play offensive tackle or possibly offensive guard, but I think he'll be an offensive tackle in the NFL. He does have like a narrow frame. His shoulders are really narrow. He's kind of weird looking. Uh, he's not the most athletic. He's like a 0-star recruit coming out of college, and a lot of people don't know this, but he went to like 4 or 5 different schools. He actually got either recruited or walked onto a tech school, played football there, then ended up transferring eventually to UW Stevens Point, which is like a D3 school. And then Paul Chryst came to Wisconsin and found him and brought him onto the Wisconsin Badgers, which is D1 obviously. And he performed well, but he's still lacking that athleticism, and you have to wonder if he's going to translate well. plus he has the injury issues. So number 32 overall seems about right for him. But I am surprised he didn't go higher. And, I am surprised Bowles went higher, but stylistically, I think Bowles fits Denver better than Ramczyk. So, I, taking away, I thought the offensive linemen would all get pushed up. They didn't. Robinson didn't go. Uh, who else is? Let me look here quickly. I really like Roderick Johnson. I know a lot of people don't like him as much, but that guy has ridiculous talent. It's just, or athleticism. It's just that he's raw and needs to put it all together. But he's so close from being so good. Um, that I would consider him in the first or high second. So I think Roderick Johnson could be a surprise to go pretty soon. Um, you know, Taylor Moton from Western Michigan. He's a guy that's gonna probably go pretty soon. Um, and I actually have Connor McDermott above him. Um, but I don't think he's gonna go for a while. But McDermott's a guy that he's my fifth best offensive tackle, and I like him. I guess I like him more than most. Forrest Lamp fell, true offensive guard. That is interesting because a lot of these offensive guards have actually gotten pushed up into the first round, even the middle of the first. Lamp falls. I think it's because he's a zone blocking scheme guy, and I think his tape is overrated. I actually had him as my number two offensive guard behind Dan Feeney, who is from Indiana, who is much less athletic, but Feeney he's much better on tape, and Feeney blocks much better at the second level, and he can pull better, even in my opinion. But where Lamp, you know, he's a guy who can get it done at the line of scrimmage, but I wouldn't want him to do any open field blocking for me. And I don't think he's gonna. He's strong, but I don't really see him opening gaping holes in the running game. So, um, I think that's being from Western Kentucky. I think he's got a lot of rawness there that he's got to learn leverage and offensive. The thing about offensive guard is you don't need crazy athleticism. You just need to be sound technically, in my opinion, and that's exactly what Forrest Lamp isn't. So his fall doesn't surprise me too much, just a little bit. But then you have Jake Button, Hodges, and Kittle. A lot of tight ends that could go soon. I like Chris Godwin and Chad Hansen at wide receiver to go soon. Dalvin Cook is falling because of character. He also has injury, but I think the character is the big issue there. Joe Mixon fell out of the first round. That's not really much of a fall for him. He was like fringe first anyways, but he's got the character. Cook has actually more serious character concerns than Mixon, and more serious injury concerns as well. So don't be surprised if Mixon goes above Cook. Mixon can catch and can take up a good volume of carries, but Cook can catch better, and Cook is a better route runner. There's a lot to like about Cook. It's just, and as athlete, he didn't test that well. Cook, it was okay, but on tape he looks better than he tested. So it'll be interesting to see between Cook and Mixon who goes. And I think the reason that the Packers are trading down, I do think they're looking at running back, but I think they're looking for Alvin Kamara, that's who the NFL Network Mike Mayock mock to us at 30, and it makes a lot of sense because he can catch and run. He's from Tennessee, and he was with Alabama and had some character issues, and he left Alabama and went to Tennessee, but he actually wasn't a starter at Tennessee, so that's interesting. But he's a better NFL quarterback than college court or NFL running back than college running back. So those guys like Christian McCaffrey and stuff that can catch the ball out of the backfield, they're always going to be better in the NFL than the college game. And Kamara can block too, so he's kind of that triple threat that even if he's not getting the carry, he can make a difference on third down when you're passing the ball. So I like Kamara at the right value, but none of these guys, like, you don't want to take a running back in the first round. And the Packers traded down to get Jordy Nelson. Um, and that kind of reminds me of what they're doing now. They ended up taking Jordy Nelson at number 36 overall. They didn't want to take a wide receiver in the first round, and now they're targeting their running back, um, and they're just going to keep trading down. Ted Thompson specifically said he told the press to put it out there that they're looking to trade down to save them a few phone calls. So it would actually be a bigger surprise if the Packers didn't trade down um, to start the day two. So we'll see what happens, but they're. I'm thinking. I mean, you know, so looking at round two, what could happen? Um, who could we trade with? Jacksonville Jaguars, possibly. They could go up from the third pick in the second round up to the first, and I think they could actually target an offensive tackle or offensive guard. They could go for Lamp or Cam Robinson. It really depends what they want, but because their offensive line isn't set, and uh, I don't really buy them, getting another quarterback like Kaiser. But if they wanted to go that route, they could go get Kaiser too. And trading down only 2 spots for the Packers would allow them to see how the board falls, and then if their guys don't get taken, they can trade down again. And if a couple other guys go off, then they can take a guy. I mean, the Packers, I don't think they're looking at cornerback, but they could use one. So Kevin King is like one of the best cornerbacks left, and I think it'll be interesting to see if they can, if at some point they change their plans and go with Kevin King instead of a running back. If these running backs just keep falling, and then maybe they can figure that they can get a running back in the third round. So, but the Packers definitely need a running back. Um, so I don't want to make it too much about just the Packers though. So otherwise, let me look who's. There are other options for trading down. Um, I've heard some people mention, some Chargers fans mentioning that they wouldn't mind trading up. Um, there are maybe Arizona. They didn't get their quarterback. Maybe they go up for Kaiser, who is like really the last good quarterback. Um, I don't think the Packers would, you know, Oakland. I've heard some fans mentioning Oakland may want to trade up. I don't really see that. If they do trade up, I don't think they would go all the way up to where the Packers are. So, once you start getting to like down to Arizona, I think you're moving down so far that you need to get a lot because how many guys are really on the board? There because that's already what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh yeah, uh, Arizona has the 13th overall or pick in the second round. So um, maybe Buffalo could trade up for Kaiser. Um, I I don't know. Buffalo doesn't seem set on their quarterback. They're not committing to him for whatever. Tyrod Taylor is a fine quarterback. I think if they committed to him, it would actually improve his play. He'd have the franchise behind him, but they're not willing to do that for whatever reason. The Saints at number 10 would make sense. That they really need a quarterback for their future. So, and they have the head coach to develop a quarterback in Sean Payton. Um, so I think he's still there, right? So, anyways, I think I'm gonna call it here. Hopefully you enjoyed the stream. I usually do politics, but um, I thought I'd give a little draft insight before the end of the draft, and we'll we'll be through 2017 NFL draft and onto the 2018 NFL draft in no time. So couple couple week a week or two, and we'll be already looking on to next year. So all right, I'll talk to you guys later.